The moment the clock struck 7, the lights dimmed and the entire hall erupted into applause. John had finally turned 70. His wife stood proudly beside him. His 5 children, his pride, his legacy, his reason for living, surrounded him with laughter as the birthday song echoed through the room. But while everyone else celebrated, John's eyes kept drifting to the entrance, waiting. Then the door opened. A courier stepped in, holding a single white envelope. No one noticed him at first. No one understood why John's heartbeat suddenly shifted. He knew exactly what that envelope contained. He had ordered it weeks ago, in secret. The courier whispered his name. John took the envelope with a calmness that frightened even him. He walked away from the crowd, away from the music, away from the cake that bore his name, and slipped quietly into the study at the back of the hall. Only the soft click of the door was heard. Minutes passed. Then came the sound of paper tearing, followed by a silence so heavy it seemed to smother the air itself. John stared at the results. 1 page, 5 names. 5 brutal outcomes, each more devastating than the last. Probability of paternity, 0%. Not one child, not even the youngest he held in his arms when he thought he was becoming a father again. The truth sank into his bones with a coldness no candle in the hall could warm. He closed the folder, slowly, deliberately, and when he stepped out of the study, the man who had walked in moments earlier was gone. In his place stood someone silent, calculating, and frighteningly calm. From that moment, his final 24 hours had begun, and what he would do before the next sunrise would shock the world. If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight. When John returned to the party, no one understood the expression on his face. It wasn't anger. It wasn't confusion. It was something far more dangerous. Resignation. The kind a man wears only when he realizes his entire life has been built on a lie. His wife, Margaret, rushed toward him with a nervous smile, asking why he had disappeared. He didn't answer. He didn't look at her. He simply stepped past her as if she were a stranger in someone else's home. The children continued laughing, unaware that the world they belonged to had already shattered. Each of them raised their glasses for a toast, celebrating the father they believed would live forever in their memories. John raised nothing. He sat in silence through the rest of the evening, motionless, distant, and hollow. Guests whispered. Margaret watched him with growing panic, but no one dared to ask the question burning behind every curious glance. What happened in the study? By the time the last guests left, the house felt colder. The birthday decorations were still hanging, but the joy had drained from them. Margaret tried once more to approach him, but John walked away, disappearing into the master bedroom and locking the door behind him. Inside the room, he spread the DNA results across the bed. 5 pages, each one confirming the betrayal he had suspected but never wanted to face. He picked up the first result, his eldest son, the one who carried John's surname the longest. Not his. The second, his daughter, the one who called him her hero. Not his. The third, the fourth, the fifth, each page slicing deeper into the life he thought he understood. John sat down slowly, the papers quivering in his hands. For the first time in decades, he felt truly alone. But it was not the loneliness of a man abandoned. It was the loneliness of a man awakening. Awakening to the fact that the betrayal had been years in the making. Awakening to the hidden patterns he once ignored. Awakening to a truth that demanded justice. And as the clock ticked into the early hours of the morning, John made a decision that would turn his heartbreak into a storm that would tear his entire family apart. He switched on the lamp, reached for a pen, and opened a fresh notebook. His first words were cold, steady, and terrifyingly calm. "I will take back everything." It was in that moment, alone, betrayed, and clear-minded, that his revenge truly began. By sunrise, John had already stopped being the man his family once knew. The softness in his voice, the hesitation in his steps, the patience in his smile. Every trace of the father they loved had drained out of him during the night. What remained was a man with purpose. He began his morning with an unsettling quiet. No breakfast, no greeting, no eye contact with anyone in the house. He moved as if he were studying every corner, every detail, every shadow, gathering pieces of a puzzle only he understood. His first stop was the old study, the room where he kept records no one else cared about. Birth certificates, property deeds, business agreements, letters from years past. Documents Margaret assumed were forgotten. They were not forgotten. They were waiting. John opened metal drawers he had not touched in decades. He spread papers across the desk, comparing signatures, tracing dates, connecting events. With every sheet he examined, another piece of the truth snapped into place. He discovered financial withdrawals made behind his back, land transferred without his approval, investments shifted to accounts that did not bear his name. Someone had been preparing for this moment long before he ever suspected, and all signs pointed to the same person. Margaret. While the rest of the family slept, John picked up the phone and dialed a number he'd memorized years ago. His attorney. The man answered groggily, confused by the early morning call. John's voice never wavered. "I need to activate the contingency file." The attorney wasn't sure if he heard correctly. The contingency file was something John created long ago, meant only for the day everything went wrong. A file that gave John the power to dismantle everything he'd built, to expose every lie, to freeze every account, and to send evidence to authorities across the country. The attorney asked what happened. John answered with only 4 words. "It's worse than expected." He hung up before the attorney could ask another question. Minutes later, John began writing letters, all of them addressed to one child. He wrote slowly, as if choosing words that would not only wound, but reveal. Every sentence carried weight. Every paragraph carried truth. Every page carried consequences. When Margaret knocked on the door asking if he was all right, John slid the lock firmly into place. He did not speak. He did not answer. He did not acknowledge her. He simply stared at the envelope containing the DNA results, and then at the notebook where his revenge was unfolding line by line. By noon, the house was awake, but the man inside the study was already living in a different world, one where truth was no longer optional and forgiveness was no longer possible. His final 24 hours had officially begun, and the first move in his plan was already in motion.
As the day wore on, John did not leave the study. Outside, the house moved through ordinary routines. Margaret tidied the birthday decorations. The children laughed nervously, unsure why their father had vanished into silence. But inside, John was unraveling a lifetime of deception. Every paper he touched told a story. Every signature, every date, every account statement revealed more than just financial irregularities. It revealed a pattern of lies meticulously constructed over decades. He discovered letters Margaret had hidden, love letters, receipts, contracts, evidence of an affair he had never suspected. And then, buried among old business documents, he found what no father should ever see. Adoption papers, transfer of parental rights, all signed without his knowledge. 5 children, all claimed as his, but none truly belonging to him. His hands shook, not from anger, not from despair, but from the cold, clear realization that his entire life had been a performance, a show orchestrated by the person he trusted most. Then came the names, the man who had been living in the shadows, the one who fathered his children, who profited from John's hard work, who smiled at him at every family gathering as though nothing was wrong. The real father, the puppet master behind the family's grand illusion. For 40 years, John had raised 5 strangers as his own, loved them, protected them, sacrificed for them. Every sleepless night, every skipped meal, every dollar saved, all given to men and women who were not his family. But John did not panic. He did not cry. He did not scream. Instead, he meticulously cataloged everything: dates, evidence, letters, bank statements, property deeds, every lie, every betrayal, every crime. He paused only once, looked at the DNA results again. 5 names, 5 truths, 5 betrayals. And in that moment, he understood exactly what needed to be done. He picked up his pen and began drafting the documents that would expose them all. Margaret's decades-long affair, the children's true parentage, hidden financial crimes, and the names of everyone who had conspired to keep him blind. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, John had finished his plan. Every letter addressed, every document ready, every secret ready to be unleashed on the world. The only question remaining was timing, and John had 24 hours to deliver his final justice. If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight.
By evening, John had become a ghost in his own house. The party decorations still hung, the children still laughed nervously, and Margaret still tried to coax a word from him. But he was already elsewhere, moving through a world only he could see. He gathered everything: the DNA results, the hidden letters, the forged contracts, the secret bank statements, the adoption papers. Each document a dagger, each envelope a weapon. Everything was meticulously organized, labeled, and sealed. John picked up the phone again, not for conversation, but for command. His attorney received precise instructions: deliver certain documents at midnight. The tax authorities, the family lawyer, the media, every envelope, every package had its appointed moment. He wrote a final letter to Margaret, his words cold, concise, and unrelenting. She would read the truth too late to stop it, too late to hide from it, and too late to deny it. Then he wrote to his children. Each one received a letter exposing the lie of their lives, revealing the identity of their biological father, the depth of their mother's deception, and the betrayal that had shaped every memory they cherished. The letters were not cruel. They were deliberate. They were precise. They were justice in ink. By 10 o'clock, John had placed the letters in the envelopes, arranged the documents, and set timers for delivery. Every package would reach its recipient simultaneously, just after his death. He moved calmly through the house, checking locks, confirming addresses, ensuring nothing could go wrong. He was methodical, quiet, unshakable. There was no anger in his actions, only clarity. He had been betrayed, and now the world would see the truth. At midnight, John sent the final instructions via email, confirming the packages and letters would all be delivered exactly as he planned. Then he returned to his study, the room where the first shock of truth had hit him, the room where the revenge began. He sat down, breathed deeply, and wrote the last entry in his notebook. By morning, the world will know. By morning, justice will be done. I am no longer a man betrayed. I am a man who sets the record straight. When the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, John was gone. Alone. Silent. But the packages, the letters, and the truth were already on their way. And when the family awoke to that morning, everything they thought they knew would have vanished forever.
By the time the sun peeked through the curtains, the house was still quiet. Margaret had woken first, anxious after a restless night. She called out for John. No answer. She knocked on the study door. Silence. Panic began to creep into her chest. When she finally forced the door open, the scene that greeted her was calm, almost peaceful. John sat in his chair, the morning light falling across his face. His notebook was open. The letters and envelopes were stacked neatly beside him. But John himself was gone. The life that had once carried the weight of 40 years of marriage and 5 children had ended. There was no struggle, no signs of forced entry, no indication of a violent act. Just a man who had completed what he intended and paid the ultimate price for it. The police arrived within the hour. Their initial reports suggested natural causes, perhaps a heart attack, the culmination of stress and heartbreak. But as investigators examined the letters, the envelopes, and the precise timing of his final instructions, suspicion began to grow. Something about the scene didn't fit. The DNA results, the letters to the children, the exposure of Margaret's decades-long affair, the financial evidence, all of it had been meticulously planned to go public in the hours after his death. Everything pointed to one thing. John had orchestrated his own death as the final act of revenge. Across the city, envelopes began arriving simultaneously at lawyers' offices, tax authorities, and even newsrooms. By the afternoon, the world began to see the destruction John had left behind, the family's empire in chaos, secrets exposed, and lives forever changed. Margaret read her letter last. Her hands shook. Her carefully built life had crumbled overnight. The children, too, received their revelations, the truth of their parentage, the betrayal, the lies their father had silently uncovered. Shock, confusion, and disbelief swept through them. For the first time, they truly understood the man they thought they knew. John's revenge had been silent, precise, deadly, complete. And though his body no longer breathed,
His final act echoed louder than any scream could have. By morning, the world had changed. The neatly ordered life of John's family lay in ruins, scattered across envelopes, letters, and official documents that no one could ignore. Margaret's carefully maintained facade crumbled almost immediately. The authorities arrived at her door within hours, armed with evidence John had compiled and sent from his study. 5 children, once proud, confident, and secure in their father's love, were now thrown into a whirlwind of shock, anger, and betrayal. Each letter revealed their true parentage. Each document exposed the decades-long deception that had shaped their entire lives. Every memory they held dear suddenly felt like a lie. Margaret was questioned, arrested for financial fraud, and confronted with evidence of the affair that had haunted the family in secret for years. Lawyers combed through bank statements and property deeds. Every hidden transaction, every secret account, every act of manipulation John had uncovered was now laid bare for the world to see. The children struggled to grasp the enormity of the truth. Some wept, some raged, some simply sat in stunned silence, realizing that their entire upbringing, the life they thought was theirs, had been built on someone else's lies. The business empire John had spent decades building suddenly teetered on the edge of collapse. Partners and associates who had believed in the family's image now questioned every decision, every contract, every transaction. Reputation crumbled faster than any court could adjudicate. The biological father, the man who had lived in the shadows all these years, disappeared. Authorities tried to locate him, but he was already gone, leaving only the devastation John had left behind. The media picked up the story within hours. Headlines screamed of betrayal, revenge, and scandal. Overnight, John's name became synonymous with meticulous justice and cold calculation. Across the country, people whispered in shock, how could a man so calm, so methodical, bring down a family empire and expose a decades-long secret, all within 24 hours of his own death? John's revenge was complete. The family he had once protected lay in ruins, and the world watched in awe, horror, and disbelief at the precise, unflinching, and terrifying power of one man determined to reveal the truth, no matter the cost.
Weeks later, after the media frenzy had quieted and the family tried to pick up the pieces, John's final letter was finally read in full. It had been addressed simply to those I loved and those who betrayed me. The handwriting was calm, precise, and deliberate. There was no anger, no bitterness, only clarity and resolve. Each word cut through decades of deception like a knife through paper. He began with the truth, the DNA results, the hidden affairs, the financial manipulations, and the betrayal that had defined the last 40 years of his life. Every secret he uncovered, every lie he endured, every act of concealment, he documented it all. But then, unexpectedly, he wrote of love. Love for the children he had raised as his own. Love for the family he had tried to protect. Love even for the person who had deceived him for decades. I raised them, I loved them, I sacrificed for them, John wrote. Though they are not mine by blood, they are mine by choice. My revenge is not cruelty, it is justice. Let the truth be known. Let lies be exposed. Let those who betrayed me see the consequences of their actions. And let the innocent remember that truth, no matter how long buried, will always find its way. And with that, John's story became legend. A man who had been betrayed in the deepest, most intimate way turned heartbreak into a weapon, silence into a revelation, and his final hours into an act of justice so precise, so calculated, that the world would never forget it. John had died, but the impact of his final act, the unflinching revelation of truth, betrayal, and consequence, would echo forever. A warning, a lesson, and a haunting reminder. Sometimes the greatest power lies in patience, planning, and the quiet resolve of a man who refuses to be deceived.
If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight.